This story happened when I was a young kid. I was staying over at my friend Gilbert's house for the weekend. He and his family actually lived on an Indian reservation since they were Native American. But despite both of us being from different backgrounds, we became friends because we were into a lot of the same stuff. On the weekends, we hung out. We spent most of the time playing video games, watching movies on cable, reading comic books, and eating junk food. This particular weekend was even better since Gilbert's family had been gone for a few days. One night, while playing video games, we heard a noise outside. We didn't think too much of it at first, but when the noise sounded like it was coming closer, it got harder to ignore. At first, we figured it was a stray dog, since this area was full of them, but we started to notice that whatever was making that sound seemed to be much larger. I asked my friend if it was possible that it could be a bear, but he said there was no way since they don't come out this far from the mountains. And just as we were in the middle of our conversation, that's when whatever was outside made a low rumbling growl. When we heard that, we immediately jumped up from our seats. My friend had the same expression on his face that I must have had, which was a look of fear in both our eyes and our mouth wide open. Even though we were scared, we decided to carefully take a quick look outside through the blinds. There, being illuminated by the moonlight, was what looked like a giant wolf or dog. It had pointy ears, body covered in fur, eyes glowing in the dark. It was looking around its surroundings before eventually looking toward the house. As it started to move, something about the way it walked in all fours looked a bit off. But before my friend and I could figure out why that was, to both our shock, that's when we saw the animal stand on its hind legs. At that point, my friend and I didn't even know what to say. There was something very human-like about the way that it was standing. And at that moment, that creature must have seen the light coming from the window, because to our horror, while still on its hind legs, that's when the creature made a dash toward the house. My friend and I wasted no time as we sprinted toward his room. But just as we entered and locked ourselves in his bedroom, we heard the creature climb up the side of the house. It proceeded to pace around on the roof shortly after. My friend and I couldn't do anything but hide behind his bed. And I'm not ashamed to admit, but we started to cry since we were so scared. We wanted to call for help, but the only phone in the house was in the kitchen. So the only thing that we could do was listen closely in fear as we heard the claws on its foot tap the rooftop. After a minute or so, the creature finally jumped off. But just as Gilbert and I thought that could have been the end of it, that's when we started to hear it growling close to the exterior walls. We could hear it circling the house. It was accompanied by what we could only describe as the creature scratching or dragging its nails across the walls and outside. The sound sent shivers down both of our spines. And just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, we suddenly heard the sound of one of the windows in the living room breaking. Both Gilbert and I thought that we were going to have to make a run for it, because if we didn't, we might have to fight off whatever was breaking into the house. And just as we braced ourselves, that's when we heard the sound of a truck coming toward the house. We both had a sense of relief when we realized the familiar sound of Gilbert's family dogs barking from the flatbed of the truck. Whatever was trying to break into the house had obviously noticed the truck as well, because the sound of the glass breaking had stopped. But even then, my friend and I stayed where we were. We were still too frightened to move. All we could hear was a bunch of commotion outside. The creature sounded like it was running away as Gilbert's family and their dogs gave chase. It wasn't until they came back that we finally came out from hiding, and we told them what happened. Upon hearing our story, they told us that when they came home, they saw what they thought was somebody trying to break into the house. But as they chased it, they could see that it was an animal of some kind. Unfortunately, the thing ran away so quickly that they lost track of it. Wanting to be cautious, Gilbert's family decided that we all stay in a friend's house that night. Later that night, as we were settling in, Gilbert's family had told us that it was possible that whatever we saw that night could have been a Skinwalker. Of course, I had no idea what that was, but they described it. I learned that a Skinwalker is a Native American legend, and it's evil. To no surprise, after hearing that, I wasn't able to sleep that whole night. After going home the next day, I eventually spoke to Gilbert on the phone, who informed me that, fortunately, there were no further incidents. But as weird as the story already was, it gets even weirder. A little over a week later, Gilbert had called to tell me that a few kids on the reservation had been walking through the arroyo and found a bunch of junk, including an old fridge. But when they pried it open, that's when they made a gruesome discovery. There inside the old fridge was the decomposing body of a nude man. I could feel the hairs all over my body standing up after hearing that. He also told me that the local authorities said that it was most likely just some drunk who wandered into the arroyo and accidentally locked himself inside the fridge. But Gilbert and I had always felt like that story of the dead man in the fridge was something a lot more sinister.